Whoops. Sorry, I don't know what just happened. Okay. I have to share screen again. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Well, it says it's being shared, but I don't have it. Do you see my screen, anybody?
No, Bob, it's not up.
I have no idea what just happened.
Now it says it's loading it.
Okay. Except, back to the other screen. Why did we do that? I apologize. I thought I had this all wired. Okay. Do we see the slide, please?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, good afternoon. Sorry about the technical issues there, and I hope it doesn't do that to me again. I want to talk a little bit today about some work we did for Department of Homeland Security, and Lori Miller was one of my two AORs, and Michelle Colby with DHS was the other on this particular project. It kind of derived from the time when Lori was on detail to DHS. We got into some conversations about biosecurity at concentrated animal feeding operations, and how we might come up with some sort of a plan that we could enhance that with certainly cost, but minimal cost. So, concentrated animal feeding operations, in case there are some of you who don't know, are defined as feeding operations that have 1,000 animal units or more being fed in a single-use facility continuously for 45 days or more. And so then the numbers provided by EPA are 1,000 head of beef cattle, 700 head of dairy cattle, 2,500 head of swine weighing more than 55 pounds. They're regulated under the Clean Water Act. In the Panhandle, we don't have CAFOs as small as any of these. The closest we might come is the swine farms, where we've got one of our swine farms has only got about 6,000 head. But 20,000 to 100,000 on our beef cattle feed yards. Probably the typical size is about 50,000 head, but we have plenty that are larger than that. Dairies, I was at a NIFA meeting, not a NIFA, NIA, National Institute of Animal Agriculture meeting a year or so ago, and somebody called large dairies 3,000 to 5,000 head, and I was like, we don't do that. We don't have any dairies that are less than 2,000 head in the Texas Panhandle anymore. They were wiped out by TB a few years ago. So we typically are 3,000 to 40,000 head milking cows on a dairy. So that 40,000 head is a big dairy. And then our swine farms are 6,000 head to 40,000 head. And then you're seeing if you can see my pointer here. So this is, cattle in their pens. Back here is the mill where we steam flake the corn. And then these are storage bins. So if you look at a dot map from Ag Statistical Services and superimpose this rectangle, that's 300 miles across, 600 miles long. And within that rectangle that includes the Texas Panhandle, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, eastern Colorado, eastern New Mexico, we raise about 80% of the fed beef in the United States. So out here, and most of that is in feed yards. So here's another feed yard, just looking at seeing some of the pens. Pens will vary in size from maybe 50 head to 250 head, and that could happen on the same feed yard. Here again is the grain mill and then storage. And here's their vehicle maintenance area, which is of some importance just because we're interested in finding ways to incentivize what we're doing with this undercarriage wash. This is a picture of the east side of Hereford, Texas. Hereford, Texas has about 450,000 beef cattle within its zip code on any given day. If cattle could vote and vote the way we wanted them to, the Texas Panhandle would control a lot of policy. This is a feed yard, here's a feed yard, here's a feed yard, here's a feed yard. All of these things that look sort of like little cities, well, they kind of are. They're little cities for cattle, and these roads are where they drive up and down to put feed in the bunks. Over here's another feed yard. I don't think you can see it very well, but up here's another one. So we have a lot of feed yards. This is a pig farm. This is a cluster of barns here and here, 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 and so forth. So we've got separation between these clusters, which can be used to advantage for biosecurity. Our pig farms generally have their own truck washes on them, so whenever they dump a load of pigs, they wash out. Before they pick up a load of pigs, they wash in. To go into the barns, you have to wash in and wash out as well. So for the most part, we don't get to take tours of barns because of that constraint. And so here is one cluster. I don't know which one it is, but so 24 barns, each of them holding 300 to 600 pigs, depending upon what stage they're in. And so here's some more pictures of the barns, or pictures actually of the barns. And then here are the silos for the feed. So our objective was an affordable undercarriage and wheel wash. We wanted something that could be used every day in routine biosecurity. We also wanted to put a little bit of a carrot out there for the feed yards to adopt this, expecting that cleaner vehicles would lead to less maintenance. We have one of the managers, the manager that was the manager at the feed yard where we installed the wash. He's now moved to another yard in the same company, but he came here from Nebraska, and so their winters are nastier than ours, more snow and more mud and so forth. And he was talking about how much his maintenance costs were on his vehicles just because of all the junk that got up underneath. So you can think in terms of transmissions overheating, of brakes overheating and becoming jammed with mud and so forth. So he was very interested in the idea of having something that he could use on a routine basis just for the operation of the yard, not even considering the biosecurity. So if that's true, then we might expect that some of these feed yards would start adopting these at their own expense. And we've had some discussions with NRCS about their matching programs and how some of that might fit in. So that stuff's going on. Budgets always come into play, so we don't know exactly where we are right now with that. But we did have a representative from the state veterinarian's office in the Kansas Department of Agriculture down here about a week and a half ago, and he was very interested. We went out to the feed yard where this is installed, and he took a bunch of pictures, and he was going to go back and talk to state veterinarian Dr. Brown and one of his committees. But they seem to be showing some interest in this. The objective, there's also an objective that we can add disinfection for heightened biosecurity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So our specifications, this began as a student senior design project. We did a couple of different semesters of it. Told them it had to be able to operate in freezing conditions. On the one that we ended up installing, we added a recirculation pump and a 3,000-gallon tank to keep the water moving, because we don't freeze deep or hard here. We do freeze. We might get below zero, but it won't stay that way for a week or two. It'll stay that way for a day or two. So other locations, as we moved north, we had to consider adding antifreeze or heating or doing something of that nature. The criteria was that we had to make the vehicle visibly cleaner. Some work done by some researchers in Canada found that just by getting the mud off, you get a 1 to 3 log reduction in infective agent just by washing alone, not doing any disinfection yet. And certainly disinfection doesn't do much if all you do is apply the disinfectant on top of that cake of mud. And then it has to be water efficient. We're in a water limited area in much of the high plains. When we get up into Nebraska, it's not so much true, but down here it is. We feed off of the Ogallala Aquifer, which is a non-renewing resource in this part of the country. And so we wanted to make sure we weren't using a lot of water. So design parameters, the students had to go in and look at how many vehicles, number of vehicles, how are they going to dispose of waste. They had to consider the environmental regulations, both the federal and the state regulations. They had to look at their capital rules and pollution discharge elimination systems. Then they had to look at the vehicle washing rules. Many states have those, maybe most. Certainly we do in Texas, and actually through the whole High Plains, all 5 states that we would be considering that. And then they had to do the engineering economic analysis. And I will tell you, engineering students, that is not their favorite thing to do. They just want to design great, fun things and not worry about how much it costs. But in the real world of engineering, that's a really, really important consideration. So they had to look at the initial cost, but they also had to look at a distributed operation and maintenance cost for the system. They went in and evaluated the soil bearing capacity. Could the site handle after excavation and installation of the system, the weight of the vehicles, the weight of the undercarriage and wheel wash? Part of that is just because this is a senior design capstone course, and they have to really go back and bring in all of their engineering coursework that they've taken into that. So in most circumstances, that wouldn't be something we'd be too concerned about. But they then had to design their foundation, the piping system. They had to specify some sort of a control system, and they had to figure out how to reuse the water. I say here, specified water decon system, which is what they did, but there are other ways to recycle the water, as we'll see in a minute. They grossly exceeded the budget. I think their operations costs were going to be $750,000 per year. The feed yard manager that was watching the presentation turned around and looked at me and was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't know where that came from. That wasn't in there 2 days ago when they ran through this with me." But they made a modification, and it was overly complicated. So you want a system that's going to be pretty easy to operate and not require a whole lot of maintenance. One of the specifications that we were given to them is that this should be a self-operating system. So a vehicle can drive up to it. It will start itself up without having to have an operator there. That's important for a couple of reasons. One of which is the manpower, just adding another person to the payroll. But the other is that in biosecurity protocols, we don't want the truck driver getting out of the truck. So here is the commercial unit that we installed. As I said, the students, we did it 2 semesters, students never quite got to the target. And so went back and worked with Lori and Michelle and reworked our statement of work a little bit and decided that if we could find a commercial unit that we would use that. And we did. So this is this commercial unit, just this unit here, not the tank. Tanks aren't very expensive. And the photo detector out here and the solid waste discharge that's hidden by the mirror of that truck. This cost about $60,000. So we modified it and bumped the price up to $70,000 with another $15,000 for installation. So here is the unit before installation on site. And so this horizontal bar here, that's just a little bit above, when it's installed, that's just a little bit above ground level. So the rest of this is buried underground, which helps us on the freezing thing because we don't freeze deep or hard here for the most part. And so having that filled with water, even without the recirculation pumps, our calculations, we were indicated we would be in pretty good shape. We went ahead and put the recirculation pump in just to make the feed yard management people a little bit happier with the whole deal. So anyhow, so here is the solid waste discharge up here. Here are the two side tracks, and over here is the center track. And so this is the same system installed really for temporary use at a construction site at Fort Mill, South Carolina. And this part is part of the tank. We installed ours differently because it was going to be a permanent installation. So they do have these concrete aprons feeding to it. And then, packed caliche back here and so forth. But they only have two tracks, but they have this sidebar with nozzles in it, and all of those nozzles are there to wash the side of the truck. We were less concerned about the side of the truck than we were the undercarriage, and that was we, as in the whole group of us that went out to look at this, which included people from NRCS and DHS and APHIS and then me and an engineer who was working with me and the feed yard manager. So this is the installation installed. There are all sorts of sightseers here. None of them had anything to do with this project except for this guy who installed it. So you can see here that we've got this middle track running through here, and that's to get more water on the undercarriage part of the vehicle. The construction site, they're more concerned with track out, just muddy tires and making tracks on the road and leaving little dirt clods that other vehicles will throw up into the windshields of following vehicles and break them and just stuff like that. So it's a liability issue partly, and it's partly an issue of aesthetics. So here you can see a nozzle, but this one is plugged and this one is plugged. There's another one here, can't see, and then a couple plugged, and then this one is another nozzle. And so instead of 12 on each side, we had 4 on each side. And that was a compromise we had to make to be able to add this track in here and have enough water pressure to be able to have all those nozzles being fed and shooting up enough. Okay, here you can see that unit here in operation, no vehicle on it, but just kind of a demonstration of the jets. And you can see some of the feed yard. There's the feed mill back there. Here is the solid waste discharge unit. Over here is this houses the pump and polymer coagulant. These concrete barriers are meant to guide the trucks in and keep them from banging in, first of all, to the wash unit itself, but also to protect the photo detector that's here. You can see the photo detector down here as well. So here is looking down through the grates on our site, and so you can see a nozzle there, you can see a nozzle there, see a nozzle there. It's all PVC pipe. It's fairly easy to work with, but it comes already packaged, ready to go. This is the Fort Mill site again, and they're washing a concrete truck that has just dumped its load and is moving off site. So you can see the jets shooting up, and then if you look very carefully, you can see some of the side jets. Yeah. Okay, so this is the solid waste discharge unit. That's at the site here in Texas. And then this is the material that was coming out of the chute in Fort Mill. Now, one of the really good things about this is that we're using a polymer coagulant, which allows us to get a lot of the dirt out and then just recycle the water. And the water comes back in through those same grates that house the pipes and nozzles, and so back down into the tank. So when you first turn on the nozzles, this one hasn't had a dirty truck on it yet. So, but when you first turn on the nozzles, usually you'll see that there's a little bit of dirt in there. So it's not perfectly clean water. But if you recall, the point is not to have perfectly clean water or a perfectly clean vehicle. It's to get a lot of the junk off. And so the wash does that. So it actually does, if you wait If you let this run for just a minute or so before you start across, then that water cleans up pretty quickly. So, and then as it hits the undercarriage of the vehicle, it comes back down through those grates. So that 2 to 3% moisture content makes it very handleable. It's pretty easy to handle. We've checked and made sure that the classification in normal circumstances is a non-hazardous waste, so we can dispose of that on site at the feed yard. This is looking down into the conveyor belt and where we pull that dirt out. So here's the belt here, chain-driven system. So what we have is an affordable commercial unit. It was modified to add the central channel to concentrate on the undercarriage more than the ones at the construction sites. It has some similarities to the student's design, or maybe it's vice versa because this system's been on the market for a while. I'm pretty sure the students never found this. Their other issues of their design indicate that they didn't really try to plagiarize anything. The 3 gallons of makeup water per vehicle is phenomenal. So this particular feed yard where it's installed has about 80 trucks entering and leaving per day. So 3 gallons per vehicle, that's about 240 gallons. So that's what, maybe 8 baths. What we put 30 gallons, 25, 30 gallons in a bathtub to take a bath, if you take baths instead of showers. But and that's because of the polymer coagulant. And so I mentioned earlier that we have to be able to do disinfection. What we would do is put a disinfection system just down road of the wash station and pump the disinfectant through there and not have to worry about it getting into the water and interfering with the ability of the coagulant to function properly. That 2 to 3% moisture content in the solids makes it really, really easy for us to handle that material and dispose of it. And what they do now is they dispose of it on site. So they don't wash all the vehicles that come on or leave now. They mostly use it for vehicles that are on the yard, moving around the yard, but would pick that up if we ever had a concern about FMD in the United States or some other infectious disease that could be carried on the vehicles entering a feed yard or leaving a feed yard. So part of the deal we made with the feed yard is that now that we have finished our installation and our initial survey of its operational capacity, capabilities, it is their undercarriage and wheel wash now. It's their responsibility to provide for operation and maintenance of it. We don't have any liability for any of that. But we have reserved in there that the wash is available for future research. Of course, that'll have to be negotiated with the feed yard manager and that, but they're real easy to work with. This one happens to be somebody that I've known for 10 or 12 years probably, and we've been involved in a number of different collaborations in the past, so no issue with that. So, and that concludes my presentation. I think I made it in 20 minutes as Lori instructed. So any questions? Drew, I'll let you handle okay.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You decided not to include the ability to disinfect in the design of this wash station. Is that correct?
Yes.
What
And that's premised on the fact that we didn't want to disinfect all the time. If we don't have an active disease episode going on, then there's not really much point in doing that. Disinfection station doesn't have to be high pressure, so we really didn't have to, we wouldn't have to worry about the cost of that. It'd be fairly easy to come in with a hand wash station and accomplish as much disinfection as you wanted. And that was kind of not my decision, but a team decision, including DHS and APHIS and our feed yard representatives and so forth. So, and we didn't want to put disinfection into the water because that would chemically alter the impact of the coagulant that we were using. And the fact that we're able to get by with using only 3 gallons of water per vehicle. I mean, the vehicle's getting a whole lot more water than that on it, but the lost water in each wash is only about 2 to 3 gallons. And so that's an overriding concern when you have a vote in your So, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I would point out, if I were to specify this again, we would not block those nozzles on the side wash. We would increase the size of the pump. The pump we have is a 30 horsepower pump, so we'd go to probably a 50 horsepower. That would have bumped the cost up to $95,000 for the unit alone, and about $110,000 with installation. So we would have exceeded budget, and that's why we couldn't do that. We did talk to DHS, and they just said they couldn't scrape together any more funds to put the larger pump in. But I would recommend doing that if I was going to specify this for other livestock operations. I will say the feed yard manager is using it. He's very happy with it. I see people are talking because of the message, but I'm not hearing anything. So it must be background noise. Any more questions? If you want to email me questions, both Drew and Lori have my email address, and Drew, if you don't mind, I would encourage you to share it with anybody who might want it. I did not want to make this a commercial for the product that we used, and so I didn't mention any their name or anything like that. But if you want more specifications, if you'll just shoot me an email, I'll let you know where you find their website. You can see the system. They've got some nice videos that they use for promotion.
Good deal. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
You bet.
Any other questions for Bob? Okay. Hearing none. Bob, thank you so much. We really appreciate you presenting on this and the work you all did.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. And thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, sir.